Hey there, welcome back. So, here's a question for you. Do you have one of these? And do you have one of these? Well, if you do, then we're gonna have a lot of fun today. And even if you don't, we're still gonna have a lot of fun because this also works great on the Mesen emulator. So, let's get started. So, of course, we're talking about Zapper games on the NES, and I'm sure a lot of you have played Duck Hunt. Now, I'm not gonna talk in detail about how Zapper work on the NES. In fact, I'm gonna leave a link for another video made by the Slow-Mo guys if you want to look more closely at how that works. But very simply put, it works like this. We have our Zapper. What happens when we press the trigger on the Zapper? Well, it's very simple. The way you would program a game for the Zapper is just when you pull the trigger, you just make the screen completely black except your target, the sprite that you want to be able to shoot. So what happens? Well, the screen goes black and that sprite becomes white. So it would look something like this. Here we have the duck, and the Zapper has a light sensor in front of it, and if it sees this little white square, then it knows that it hit the target. So all we do is just quickly flash the screen to black, except the target, which will turn white. And that's, in simple terms, how the Zapper works. So what we're going to look at today is a new module that I made. But, and this is a big but, I'm not going to take credit for this whole Zapper thing, because this is based on a tutorial by Kevin81 on the NESmaker forum, and he has done a fantastic job. I mean, it's revolutionary. A lot of us were talking about this for a few years, wanted to make Zapper games, no one really cracked it, but Kevin81 solved this whole thing. So thank you very much, Kevin. Now let's take a look at how this would work in NESmaker. So here I have a blank NESmaker folder. And I also have this thing called Zapper export. Now that's a file that I downloaded and extracted here. And it's something that I made. And basically what's in here is assets, like I usually provide with the videos, but also this thing called module. And there's also a test game in here. So first of all, there's a file called credits. And of course, at the top of this list is Kevin81. He deserves all the credit for this Zapper thing. But I also included two other tutorials. And that's another one tutorial from Bucket Mouse, which is how to make the screen shake. Because I'm using that in this module. And we'll look at that in just a little while. And I also included something here from Dale Coop, which is quick fix for the first background sprite color palette issue. And I don't know if I absolutely needed that, but I chose to include it anyway. You don't have to go into detail about that in this video. But anyway, there's a credit file here for the people who contributed with the tutorials. And there's also a file here called install, and it very simply tells you how to install this module. Now it's super simple, so I don't think we're going to have to read that text file right now, because what we need to do is here in the file that folder that I downloaded, I just go into module, the folder called module, and this file called zapperbase459.mod. I'm going to copy that file. Then I'm gonna go to my NESmaker folder here, default NESmaker folder. Then I'm gonna go to modules, the folder called modules, and I'm just gonna paste this new module file in there. So now there's a Zapper module together with the other ones. But we need to go back to the Zapper export folder. Because here in the module folder there's also this thing called mod Zapper. So we need to copy that one too. And back to our NESmaker folder. And this time we're going to go to Game Engine Data, Routines, Base 4.5, and Game. And I'm just going to paste this folder in here. And that's it. Now we have the Zapper module. So what do we have to do now? Well, let's just make a test game based on the assets I provided. So I'm just gonna start up NESmaker now. And there we go. New project, create a blank tile set. Now I'm gonna call this Robo Zapper. Robo Zapper, like that. And now I have to make sure to choose the Zapper base from the list of starting modules. So Zapper base, okay. Alright, and like always I'm just gonna save this project, Robo Zapper. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the graphics. So I'm just gonna go back to my Zapper export folder, assets, and here in this thing called Robo Zapper, I'm just gonna select all the files in here, copy them, and then back to my NESmaker folder, graphic assets, and here in my new Robo Zapper folder, I'm just gonna select everything, delete it, and I'm just gonna paste in the graphics that I just copied. Alright, so now back to NESmaker. Now I'm gonna go to palettes, all palettes, and import. And here in my Zapper export folder, there under assets, we have the all palettes file. I'm gonna select that one and click open. For the monster palettes, all monster palettes, right click, import, and again in the Zapper export folder under assets, I'm gonna choose all monster palettes and open. So for the game objects, same thing, select game objects, import all game objects, select game objects and open. Monster graphic banks, I'm just gonna select graphics bank 0 and monsters, and go up here and choose monster, import all monsters, and choose monster objects, open. So there we have our monsters, but we also need a monster group. So I'm just gonna create a group called monsters1. And I'm gonna select all of the monsters in here. Now we're gonna talk a little bit more about these monsters in just a little while, but for now let's just set this up. So I'm just gonna save it like that. Robo 1, Robo 2, Monster 1 spawner, Monster 2 spawner. Alright. Now I'm gonna go to HUD and boxes up here. I'm gonna right click HUD and boxes, import HUD data. And I'm gonna choose HUD here. Open. And now I'm gonna go to overworld, right click, import both maps, yes. And I'm gonna choose maps here and open. Right, so here we have our little game. But we need to go to screen info, day monsters, and select the day monster group, which will of course be monsters 1. So select monsters 1 and OK. Now, how about we test this game? Okay, oh, there we go. So first of all, the audio is very low by default, so I'm gonna put. Okay, so I thought I made a mistake, but then I remembered that we haven't included any audio yet, so everything's fine. But you got a little glimpse of the game. We at least know that it's working now. So, let's just go here to our menu on the left. And let's start by noticing something here. I'm gonna go to my input editor down here. Right now, you can see that it's completely blank. I don't have any input scripts whatsoever at the moment. And in this case, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to have any input scripts in this game because we don't need it. Now, if you're going to make menus or something where you have to control a character with the D-pad or whatever, then you would have to use input scripts like we always do. But the inputs for the Zapper is sort of hard-coded into the module itself. So I just wanted to point that out. But let's look at, well, first of all, let's look at the player object. Here's the player object. Now, this is going to be a little strange because the player object here is just a blank little square. It is not going to do anything. But the way that NESmaker is set up, we have to have a player at the screen so that NESmaker knows that what the active screen is. So we have to have a little player object, but it's just a blank thing. I just selected the lower right sprite tile because that's a blank one. And then I just go to object details, and select persistent and player. That's all I need. I mean, maybe we need some sort of bounding box. I don't think so. But what we do need is persistent and player. And then when I go to my screen here, I just place my player up here in the left corner. Now, I'm not going to place it up in the HUD because that's going to create problems for us. But you can place it just below the HUD, for example. Place my player right there, right up here. Now I think you could probably place them wherever, but you know, just place them up here and you'll be fine. So the player object is going to be sort of a, he's not going to be, we're not going to be using the player object in our Zapper game. But what about the monster objects? Well, obviously we need some of those. So I'm gonna go to Robo 1 here, my first monster. Now he's just a monster like we normally set them up. He has 2 animations, and if I go to object details and details, we can see that he's set up as a monster. But there's another checkbox down here. Now usually this bottom one is called NPC, but since this is a Zapper game, I don't think we'll be needing too many NPCs in this game. So I changed NPC to Zappable. Now if you followed Kevin81's tutorial on the forum, you'll see that he set up, I think it's this bit under monster bit for Zappable, but I moved it here. So it's this one. So when you set up a monster, you have to check monster and Zappable. And of course, if you want him to move, he needs speed and acceleration speed, just like normal. And you know, solid object reaction, edge object reaction, just the normal stuff. If it hits a solid, it's going to reverse direction. If it hits the edge of the screen, it's going to be destroyed. Because I want this guy to go across the screen, and when he hits the edge, I just want him to disappear. So, you can of course set this up however you want. The important part here is that we need to check monster and zappable. And the action is just simple: move right for 7 and then advance. And then he's going to stop and advance. But here's a new action that I've added to this module. It's called hurt player. I should probably have called it shoot at player or something like that. But anyway, this is a new action. And that means that this guy can go into a state where he has an action step, where that action step is going to hurt the player. Now we have to stop and think about that for a minute, because what does that mean? We don't have a little guy walking around and he can get hurt and you know, that normal stuff, because we don't have a player object like that. So we just have to use our imagination almost. So what I've done here, what hurt is going to mean in this Zapper module is that when the monster gets to an action step where he performs the action called, let's see, hurt player. When he gets to that action step, then we trigger a script, and let's just look at that script now. So I'm going to go down to behaviors, AI behavior, and in fact I called it shoot at player here. Alright. So it's a really simple script. Shoot at player. If we want, we could use a sound effect. I mean, in fact, we're going to do that in just a second. But here's how this hurt thing works. There's a hurt timer for the player. And the way I set it up by default is that when this enemy hurts me, then I'm going to go into some sort of hurt state. Well, that doesn't really mean a lot, except that there's a timer that's going to count down, and that is going to last for 1 second. So for 1 second, I'm going to be invincible. Again, we just have to imagine this, since there's no guy walking around. But this guy hurts me, and I can't be hurt for another second. So, and that's what this little check does. If the player hurt timer is 0, then we can hurt the player, and then we just run the handle hurt player script. But if the handle hurt timer is not 0, if it's not 0, then we skip this thing, because that means we're invincible. So let's look at our player hurt script now. Handle player hurt, right? Select that one and edit. And again, it's a pretty simple script. Now, again, since this is not a player guy walking around, this script is going to be a little different. First of all, I included the shake routine by Bucket Mouse that we saw earlier. So that's what this is. When the player is hurt, the screen shakes. So we get some feedback that we are hurt. Then it says here, player will be invincible for about 1 second after being hurt. And that's what this thing does. We load 60 and put that into player hurt timer. So for every frame, this is going to count down one at a time. So there are 60 frames in 1 second, so 1 second invincibility. Then we also have this thing where we decrease my health, which is something that we're going to display up in the HUD. And then, of course, since we are using the HUD, we need to update HUD element. This is a default NESmaker macro. And in this case, HUD element 0. Let's take a look at that. HUD element 0, that's my health. So we need to make sure that that corresponds. If you're going to make a game yourself, you need to make sure that the first one here is my health, because that's what it says here in the player HUD script. Now obviously you can change that around, but just make sure that you keep track of what you're doing. So update HUD element 0, my health. Right, then we say load my health and branch if not equal. So if my health is not 0, that means the player has more health, and we just continue down here. Now if my health is 0, then I said lose life. Now I haven't added any code for that because people might want to handle that differently. So you just have to do whatever. You know, maybe you just have one life and you go to the game over screen, or maybe you want something special to happen. But you need to add some code for when you lose a life here, where it says lose life. And that's the player HUD script. That's all it does. So, like I said, it's going to be a little bit using our imagination for this, since we don't have a visual player on the screen. So, what about the shooting part? Well, the shooting part is this thing that Kevin added. So, if we go to project settings, script settings, and we go all the way to the bottom here, there's this thing called Zapper handler. So if we look at that, then we're gonna see a lot of code here that Kevin made that is going to help us actually get this Zapper thing to work. So we're not gonna look at this in detail, but basically what happens here is that this is going to make those white squares or rectangles when the screen flashes. That's what this thing does. So yeah, and flash the screen. So we don't have to worry too much about that. But there's one thing in here. First of all, if we want some sort of sound when we shoot, then we can just uncomment this one. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. So here in NESmaker ASM on line 78, I'm going to remove that comment and save the file. So now it says play sound SFX shoot at line 78 in the Zapper script. And let me go back to the shoot at player script, the hurt player thing, because there was a sound effect here too. So shoot at player, I'm going to remove that comment there as well and save the file. So now we have a sound effect for when the monster shoots at the player. Well, at least here in the code, we have to import it in just a second. But we have a sound effect for shooting at the player. We have a sound effect for shooting, zapping with our gun. However, if we have a sound effect when we kill the monster, then we're gonna have sound effect there as well. So that sound effect is probably going to override this one. So this sound effect, shooting, we're probably just gonna hear that when we miss our target. So let's go back to NESmaker project settings and let's look at handle. Let's see here, handle monster hurt. Let's see what that looks like in this module. So what this thing does, it creates a monster death object. Now by default I set that monster death object to be game object 8. So that's this one here under game objects. This object will be created and the monster object will be destroyed. So this is just a standard thing that we usually do when we create the monster death objects. We get the X and Y position, set object screen. We don't really need that since this is not a scrolling game, but you know, it's fine. So we destroy the object, and I'm going to remove the comment for the play sound, so we get a sound effect for when the monster dies. Then I add 100 to the score. This is just a normal NESmaker macro for add value, and here in the comments you can see how that works. And again, we need to update the HUD. So update HUD element, but HUD element 1 in this case, because now we are updating the score. So yeah, that's it. And then we create the monster death object. Now if you want to use another object, you don't want to use this game object 8 for the monster death object, you can just go to project settings and user constants, and down here there's a thing called monster death object. It says 8 right now. You just change it to whatever game object you want to be the monster death object. Alright, so now we have some sound effects for when a monster dies. We have, let's call it a sound effect for when we miss our target. There's a sound effect for the monster shooting at us. I don't think, yeah, so we don't have a sound effect for when the player gets hurt, but that's okay. So now let's go back to NESmaker and let's go to sound. I'm gonna right click sound, import FamiTracker.txt, and in my Zapper export folder under assets, there's a file called sound effects. So I'm gonna select that one and open. So now we have a few sound effects here. So now let's try to run this game again. See if we can see anything. Let's hope it works. Yeah. So those little monsters walk across the screen, they shoot at us, and if you can see up here at the HUD, you can see we are actually losing health. Now I haven't made anything nothing's going to happen when we lose all our health in this case, but you saw where you could change that in the code. Now the problem is I can't shoot these guys. I want to be able to shoot them. So here's the cool thing in Mesen. If we go up here to options, input, and if we go to player 2, it says standard controller for player 1 and player 2. For player 2, I'm going to choose the Zapper. So that means that the Zapper gun is plugged into port 2 on the NES. And I'm going to go to advanced, and I'm going to uncheck this checkbox that says hide mouse pointer when using Zapper. So I don't want to hide the mouse pointer because I need to see where that is on the screen. So I'm going to uncheck that checkbox and click OK. And now, if you can see my little arrow here, I click the left mouse button and I'm shooting. But of course, I'm not shooting anything. I miss on every single shot. But what if I hit some guy here? Yeah. Seems to work fine. So it's really as simple as that. Now, obviously, this will create a very, very basic Zapper game. Like I said, even if you want some sort of game over screen or something like that, you need to add all of that yourself. But all of the Zapper stuff and how we handle that is sort of taken care of here, at least the basics. So if you want to make a full game out of this, you're probably going to have to add some custom code. But you know, it's a start. It's a start at making a Zapper game. And basically there's nothing special about it, except for setting up the Mesen emulator that we just saw. But the thing you need to remember is just this checkbox for the monster, zappable. And also I added some new action steps. Now this module is based on the Mesen module, so because that was the most compact with the least amount of additional features. So it's a very basic module. But that also meant that there were very few action steps. So I added move left, move right, move up, and move down. But also spawn monster 1 and spawn monster 2. And of course this thing called hurt player, which is shooting at the player. So we have all that. What's this monster spawning thing? Well, if we just place a monster here on the screen like that, then he's going to walk across the screen, and whether we shoot him or not, when he gets destroyed, that's it. That's the end of the game, right? So obviously we don't want that. We want something where the monsters appear over and over again. Probably. We probably want that. So if I go to monster spawner 1 here, that's just, again, just like the player, it's just a blank tile. Just chose a blank tile for the graphics because I don't want to see this spawner object. But if I go to object details there, don't have to check anything. This is not going to be a monster, anything like that. But in this case, what I want to happen is I want this invisible square to move up and down. You don't see it, but he moves up and down. So that's why I have some speed here. Max speed, acceleration speed. And if he hits a solid object, he's going to reverse direction. If he hits the edge of the screen, it's going to reverse direction. So it's really simple. It's just an invisible square moving up, and after he's done moving up, then we run this spawn monster code. We're going to look at that in just a second. When it's done with that, it just goes back to the first one, which is moving up. So it's just going to bounce up and down until it hits a solid object or the edge of the screen. It's just going to move up and down like that. And somewhere along the way, it's going to spawn a monster. So that monster is the monster 1, for example, so it's just going to move right. And this invisible guy just goes up and down, spawning monsters that will move right. So let's look at the spawn monster code. Project settings, script settings. If we go down to where it says monster here under AI behaviors, monster 1 spawner. Let's look at that one. Again, it's not a huge script. So monster 1, I begin by saying that that's 16. That means object 16, object type 16. So if I go back to NESmaker now, object 16, that's the very first monster object, because game objects go from 0 to 15, and the very first monster object is going to be object 16, and that's this one. So that's why it says 16 here, which of course you can change if you want. If you want to use another monster for this, monster 1 spawner. But what this script does when it spawns the monsters, it starts by counting how many monster objects are there on the screen right now. That's what this macro here does. It counts all the monsters, all the objects with the monster flag enabled. I'm going to say compare to 3, which means are there 3 monsters on the screen? Well, if there are less than 3 monsters on the screen, then we spawn a new monster. If there are 3 or more, then we skip this spawner because we don't want to fill the screen with monsters. It's going to create lag, sprite issues, a lot of stuff. So this is going to limit that for us. But what happens when we spawn a monster? Well, it's kind of like we did with the monster death object. Just get the X and Y position of this invisible square. We get the X and Y position of that, and then we just create this monster object at that position, which in this case was object 16. And that's all that happens in this monster spawner. So the same thing goes for monster spawner 2. It's exactly the same thing. Let's see if I can find it. AI behaviors, monster spawner 2. So it's exactly the same thing, only now we're spawning object number 17. And object number 17 is of course the next monster here. This is monster 16. And if you look at the object details for this one, it says move left. So the first monster moves right, this guy moves left. And there are 2 invisible monster spawners. They just go up and down. We don't see them, but they go up and down, spawning these monsters. So again, if you want to make a full game out of this, you would have to program some logic. You know, is there going to be a timer? So when you shoot some of these guys after a certain number of seconds or whatever, then you go to the next level. Or after you shoot a certain amount of these guys are going to go to the next. So there are a lot of these things that you have to program yourself. But like I said, now you have a starting point for this. So that's it for this new module, Zapper Module. And again, thank you very much to Kevin81 for making this possible. I think it's amazing. So now the question becomes, does this work on a real TV? Let's try it out. Well, I would call that a big success. So that's it for this time, and I hope you have as much fun with this new module as I had. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.